Letter 20, June 17th. Bunny was tiny, maybe only 15 centimeters long. Although Bunny's coat was pure white, the fur on Bunny's body, feet, paws, nose, ears, and tail was flecked with gray. Shu spotted Bunny immediately as we strolled past the row of pet shops along the Seine near Pont-Neuf. We looked in several other shops and laughed at the horrifying sight of rabbits so big that on their hind legs they reached our waist. We spun joking tales of what would happen if we tried to keep one of these rabbits in Clichy, how they might put on bibs and sit with us at the dinner table, or how they could leap across the 35 square meter apartment from kitchen to bedroom in a single bound, crash through the dividing wall. Then we looked at some small rabbits in a few shops, but none of them really appealed to us. Finally, Shu said that the most important thing about caring for a pet was karma, so we went back to the first shop. I asked the shopkeeper if I could look at one of the 2 baby rabbits that were only 3 months old. He plucked the rabbit out of the cage, telling me to take a good look, as I asked many questions like how to feed it, how to take care of it, and how to tell if it was sick. Then it occurred to the shopkeeper to check under the little rabbit's tail to see if it was a male, which we hoped, but it wasn't. So Shu turned back to the cage and looked at the other rabbit, the one with pink eyes, and said that this was the one she had noticed first. We were jubilant, and we carried the pink-eyed male and his accessories back home with us to Clichy, carrying the 15-centimeter-long white cage down into the Pont-Neuf metro station, where we took the 7 to Palais Royal Musée du Louvre, and then transferred to the one before catching the 13 at Champs-Élysées Clemenceau toward Clichy. On the crowded rush-hour train, I placed the white cage on the floor and carried 3 big bags of kibble on my shoulders, leaning on a pole. Shu sat down in an open seat next to me and played with the rabbit in its little paper box. Watching the 2 of them, I resolved that they were my companions for life, and that I would fight for them on the treacherous journey of life until death. Zoe, I'll take good care of Bunny for you. Oh, if one were to call this book an unintelligible collection of hieroglyphics with no words and a plot that had long since disappeared, one would be right. I'm confused about whether it's a matter of our love trying to capture me or to capture her, or of us trying to capture our love. From the first time I saw her, before either of us had even exchanged a word, I dreamed of her each night until these continuous dreams drove me to write her a letter every day and to love her unconditionally. Shu often joked that I was a terrorist and mystic combined. Was I? How could I not be? Given the irrational and metaphysical nature of human existence, did I really have a choice? Could reason really prevent someone from killing himself or going mad? Could it really prevent someone from being unfaithful or from being struck dead in an instant due to infidelity? I despair. Even now, my answer is still no, and to the final day, I still clearly see that I am bound by fate to love her, and even more am doomed to die, struck by the lightning of her unrestrained infidelity, her betrayal and abandonment. I've never regretted loving her this way. I'm still happy she came to Paris, and let me give her a beautiful home, a blossoming love. I had wanted it for so long and attained it. But I despair. I despair over my peculiar personality and fate. She wasn't born unfaithful. and I wasn't born faithful. My life had been a journey from infidelity to fidelity, and her life has been a journey from fidelity to infidelity. Such is the journey determined by the individual materials of each life. And the instant our journey overlapped and influenced the other, my fragile personality exploded, and my individual self, caught between heaven and earth, was soundlessly, breathlessly sacrificed. This is merely called nature. In No Longer Human, Osamu Dazai tells us how an older man takes an innocent young woman as his wife after a long battle with depression. For him, the young wife is like the new shoots of spring, purging his life of darkness and pollution, and providing him a bourgeois existence as a newlywed. One night, he witnesses his wife, whose innocence inspired him to trust again, having sex with some random shopkeeper upstairs. His wife had been raped and wasn't to blame, but it split him open. Human nature has its fatal weaknesses, but love means embracing the whole of human nature, the bad within the good, the benign within the malicious, the beautiful within the tragic. Love is the experience of this whole, its unfinished parts, including those of one's own in relation to those of the other. Bunny's cage was placed at the foot of our bed. He was so lovely and active and chewed through countless books on the shelves. When we ate, we lifted him up onto the table, and at night he kept us company when we worked or watched television. Most of all, he loved to stretch out under Shu's desk and nap. The very first thing we did upon returning home each day was to let him out of his cage and leave him out until it was time for bed, and one of us locked him back up. Watching Shu play with him, or feed him yogurt, or add hay to his bedding, or change his food or pet him softly, or chase him around the apartment was the essence of all my fantasies of home. I wanted nothing more from life. After the death of his wife, André Gide wrote a Nukmane into a stark confession of his failed marriage. I've had my copy for 5 years, and I often turn to it while writing this fiction of human nature, for Gide's sincere account is filled with the power of love and ressentiment. It consoled me during this painful process of writing. Only a spirit of artistic sincerity can console the souls of humankind. Gide wrote, "What's unique about our story is that it has no obvious contours. The time involved is too long, spanning my whole life, a continuous play, invisible, secret, and the story true." Shu often laughingly protested at my overindulgent adoration of Bunny. As I picked him up and snuggled and kissed and nipped him, I think this was just me channeling affection for Shu onto Bunny. But I guess Bunny and Shu were always closer. They understood each other more naturally and had more in common. My disposition seemed distant from theirs. Once, when we took a long trip together, Shu pleaded for me to bring Bunny with us, instead of leaving him at home for so many days. But in the end, it was out of concern for his safety that we left him behind. Shu worried that he wouldn't have enough to eat while we were gone and moved one out of the potted green plants next to his cage. When we returned, we found he had eaten most of the plant's leaves. The morning Shu was to leave Paris, she hurriedly snapped some pictures of him before finishing her packing. Bunny hopped in circles at her feet. At one point, Shu lifted her leg as Bunny clung to her ankle with his entire little body and hung there. My heart tightened. Bunny also couldn't bear to see her go. Bunny had a soul too, and knew that she was about to abandon the both of us. He knew with his brief 10 months of life that he would be parted from Shu forever. Zoe, what do you think Bunny is doing right now? I'll never forget that moment. We were on the sleeper train from Nice, and in the middle of the night, I climbed up to her bunk to give her an extra blanket, and that's when she asked me the question. I jumped to the ground and went out to the hallway. The wind howled and pushed against the glass of the windows. The world outside was pitch black with faint starlight. I lit a cigarette and asked myself how I could change to keep loving her. Zoe, when we get home, will Bunny greet us at the door wearing a suit and tie? Zoe, of all the scenes in Angelopoulos films, the one that moves me the most is in Alexander the Great. Alexander, a child of fortune, adopts a woman in town as his mother whom he loves. He eventually marries her, and while wearing her white wedding gown, she is shot for resisting the totalitarian regime. For the rest of his life, he loves only her. Alexander returns from the battlefield and enters his room. There's only a bed, and hanging on the wall, his mother's blood-stained wedding gown. He says to the gown on the wall, "Femme, je suis retourné." Then he lies down quietly and sleeps. And on it flows. I long to lie down quietly by the banks of a blue lake and die. And when I'm dead, for my body to be consumed by birds and beasts, living only the bone of my brow for Shu, like Alexander, loyal to an everlasting love. I wish you happiness and health, but I cannot complete your journey. I'm a visitor. Everything I touch causes me real suffering and does not belong to me. There is always someone who says, "This is mine." But I did once say proudly, "I have nothing of my own," for now I know that nothing means nothing. That one does not even have a name, and that sometimes one must borrow one. You can give me a place to look at. Forget me by the seaside. I wish you happiness and health. Theo Angelopoulos, The Suspended Step of the Stork.